Okay, welcome everyone. This is Steve Sir Heinrich. We are getting started now. We had a little technical difficulty here at the beginning. I appreciate your patience. I'm going to share some screens. All right, Andy, I'll turn it over to you if you're all set.
Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks especially Bruce. I was so excited, Bruce, whenever you'd agreed to be on this webinar for our audience to get to hear the story of your journey as a leader in working with your medical staff and sourcing and contracting this category. Hear some of your knowledge and subject matter expertise. So no pressure, Bruce, but you're going to have to deliver today.
Okay.
Also had a privilege of getting to work with Dr. Jonathon Spanyer a little bit through work with one of our customers over the course of the past year. And Dr. Spanyer's perspective, for those of you who have joined in these webinars, we do a survey, and Dr. Spanyer was kind enough to take some time to complete our survey. We have a research interest at Curvo in how our physicians and surgeons are learning about device costs, comparing those with one another, how often they're looking at new devices and techniques and procedures. And we like to marry up that perspective with a sourcing perspective like Bruce's. So it's going to be really interesting for me personally, hopefully for the audience as well, to listen to Dr. Spanyer's perspective about how his relationship maybe with the supply chain is evolving or has evolved, and then to have Bruce share his perspective on how he's really built those bridges with his medical staff. So without further ado, thanks again, Bruce. Thanks in absentia, Dr. Spanyer. We'll dive first into Dr. Spanyer's perspective. And Bruce, I'll bounce a few of these off of you to see if there are any surprises as we go through his answers. But Dr. Spanyer, incredibly talented guy, good-hearted guy, kind guy, interested in learning and doing good work for patients. Degree in biomedical engineering from University of Cincinnati, MD from University of Cincinnati, fellowship trained at Harvard and at Mass Gen, top doctor by Cincinnati Magazine in 2018, really an up-and-comer in the space. Also active in medical missions to Honduras, Ecuador, and Haiti. Just a really overall good guy. So some of the things, this is a standard format, those of you who've joined our webcast before. First thing we tend to ask surgeons is, how often do you look at new medical device products and research alternatives? Dr. Spanyer is saying constantly. Medicine's rapidly evolving. Physicians have to continually evaluate new techniques and technology. Alternative products are reviewed multiple times a year. Technology changes and pricing on devices changes frequently. So he's very active in it, very interested in it. Bruce, would you say that's typical of your medical staff, or do you tend to have maybe some long-term practitioners who aren't so in tune to what's going on in the market?
No, I mean, in particular, our orthopedic surgeons, I think, are very engaged in not only what's going on in the market, but they're engaged in the process. And I don't want to jump ahead to some of Dr. Spanyer's comments, but they're very involved in the process, not only of the clinical outcomes of the product, but also what the financial implications of those products are. So I think our staff is at least as engaged as he sounds to be.
Yeah, that's good. And how often would you say your medical staff is taking a look at the information coming from supply chain, either through yourself or through your service line administrator? Is that a monthly look? Is that a quarterly look, an annual review? What's the sense of the cadence there?
No, it is monthly. And very briefly, we have what we call our orthopedic perioperative committee, which is chaired by an orthopedic surgeon. Coincidentally, right now, the chairperson is one of our major joint doctors, surgeons, and we meet on a monthly basis. And it's a periop committee. It doesn't address only supply expense. It addresses quality and efficiency and other things. But depending on the topic, the time of what we may be dealing with, I'm on the agenda every month, and sometimes it's a 5-minute update, sometimes it's a 20-minute deep dive on a particular subject.
Yeah, no, those interdisciplinary teams are so rewarding to be a part of. When you see team members from multiple departments and multiple areas of care from the patient experience get together and start to coordinate clinically and financially, that's a lot of fun, rewarding stuff that comes out of that. So that's great that you have that venue. If we skip down, Dr. Spanyer saying that clinical literature is his most significant guide when it comes to evaluating new products. But when we ask about learning about what devices cost, he says device costs are elusive. Companies don't want to discuss. The company doesn't want to discuss it. The hospital's reluctant to share data. Few resources exist to guide purchasing. What's your take? I don't want to couch this in any way. What's your take when you read this, Bruce?
I kind of jumped ahead and read it, and a couple of comments. One, companies obviously try to hide their cost and not share it. What I have found, at least here in North Carolina, we've got pockets within the state of large medical areas ourselves, Raleigh, Charlotte, and I find that those surgeons compare prices with each other to see if they're doing better than the next guy. And maybe down the road, or I can expand on it now, I think a key comment here is the hospital is reluctant to share data. And if the hospital's going to take that position, then I don't know that you'll ever build the type of rapport and relationship with your medical staff that we've been able to accomplish here. So that I'm sorry to hear him make that statement.
I kind of latched onto this too, and knowing your story of what you really attribute success to in building bridges with your medical staff, I was very curious if you were going to latch onto that as well. And in fact, that probably would give you the chance right now. I think it's a great lead-in to share really what's at the heart or at the root of some of your engagement with your medical staff and where that trust has come from.
Okay. And again, I know maybe in a future slide, we may talk a little bit about my background, but just to couch the answer to that, I've been here at New Hanover about 11 and a half years now. We just recently concluded, I think it's about our 5th or 6th RFP for orthopedic joints while I've been here. During that time, to get to the type of engagement we have with our surgeons today, it wasn't always quite like that. It was okay when I got here, but I found, in my opinion, the best way and what worked here is to be fully transparent with your data. The first time we did the RFP, when I was here, and I think was within my first year. And I'm going to use the term "we" often, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit. And I apologize if I'm going off course here, but I'm going to use the term "we" quite frequently. I also am fortunate that I work very, very closely with our service line administrator for orthopedics, who is an RN, and so he has both a financial but also a clinical background that I don't have. So when you hear me say "we," that's what I'm referring to. But we determined that the best way to get these guys on board was to be fully transparent with our data, show them, we're making money here, we aren't making money here. Where we're making money, we think we could make more if we address these costs. We were just fully transparent with our data. And I think that was the beginning of them being our orthopedic surgeons, kind of trusting us, believing in us, buying into the process, and being sure that the data was accurate. And over the years, as we've demonstrated that through these 5 or 6 RFPs, each iteration of that RFP, they get more and more comfortable with us, to the point now where they will participate to the degree that we need them. They'll stay out of it if we don't need them, but they're there. And I can tell you story after story, and I won't right now, where they've come to bat for us, and it's just been really good. And I've been very, very fortunate to have a group of such engaged surgeons.
No, I think that's excellent. And really, it ties perfectly back to the story, I think, that we're seeing come from Dr. Spanyer's profile here. So, we ask him how he learns about device costs, and he's basically saying it's frustrating. I mean, that they're elusive. Companies don't want to talk about what the prices are. The hospital, in his experiences, has been historically reluctant to share data, and he's not finding good public resources to help him find that out. So, I'm seeing an angst, and I do have some personal knowledge here, so I know his level of interest or engagement, some angst that he can't get to that information. If you look, when we ask next how much the device cost matters to him, he's saying healthcare in America is continuing to cost nearly 20% of the GDP. We spend far more than the next first world countries. Outcomes are no better than in other countries. Given this information, cost is a big target and an area of concern for responsible physicians. So he's saying, I care a lot about cost. It's very much top of mind to me, and I can't find out what these things cost. So you contrast that. You got an up-and-comer, strong practitioner, hungry for this information. Contrast that with what you're saying, Bruce. If you start sharing the data, if you start becoming more transparent, not just in what the devices cost, but even what you're able to make profitability-wise, where you think you need to be, what those contributions ought to be, you've seen that be the seeds for getting those surgeons really on your team and on your side as a trusted partner when it comes to doing sourcing and contracting work. Just a real opportunity for our audience to look at that and maybe even wonder, do I have a potential champion or two like Dr. Spanyer in my medical staff with whom we could start building these bridges of sharing data, being open, and really get somebody engaged that can be a helpful partner. I don't know, any follow-up on that, Bruce?
Yeah, just one other comment is you don't want the sales rep to be the source of the financial information for the surgeons.
Right.
You need to replace that role.
Yeah.
And you need to be the one, your institution needs to be the one that goes out there and replaces the sales rep, at least in that role. Mm-hmm. That when the surgeon wants financial information, he's coming to you and not turning to his rep at his side. And because you just never know what story they're going to get.
Yep. No, that is excellent. And hopefully it's one of the takeaways. It's a recurring theme in these webcasts of what an opportunity we have in supply chain to be that credible, trusted partner for sharing information about devices with our medical staff. So very much a great point. Thank you, Bruce. Let's see, as we dig in a little more on Dr. Spanyer's answers. Do you know how much the hospital's being reimbursed for the devices you're using and procedures you're doing? Yes, though it was difficult to obtain this data and took years of trust building to obtain. So again, kind of antithetical to be open, share everything, and you get so much farther down the road from a business perspective. What products are you not willing to switch? I think there isn't any real allegiance in Dr. Spanyer's mind. His allegiance is to value. And so anything that's offering a clear advantage, I think cost or clinical advantage, he's all ears. And he feels like most total joint replacement products, including total hips and total knees, are substantially similar, and outcomes have not been shown to be significantly different. It's a stable technology. Bruce, how much has device outcome played into your engagement with your medical staff and your sourcing and contracting initiatives on arthroplasty?
Well, I not just on arthroplasty, but I guess specifically to that, outcome is something we always take a look at, and we take a look at it through this committee that I mentioned, where our surgeons are again towards what we're reading on the screen right now, where they're going to weigh the outcome of the product. They obtain that either through their own experience, through literature review, whatever method, but they get comfortable with what the outcome of the product either they're getting or purported to get. And they'll weigh that against the finances and say, okay, this outcome is a little bit better, but not worth what I'm going to pay for it. Or guess what? In this case, the outcome is worth every penny the vendor's asking for it.
Yep. And
they're pretty good at doing that.
Yeah. No, I find that same thing that they will calibrate. If you're able to put the practice pattern information and the cost information side by side right there with them, they might see that, okay, it's $1,000 difference to pull a ceramic head or a metal head, and that might be extremely surprising, and they might then calibrate to the right use case where sometimes it's a value, sometimes it's not. So I
Hmm.
completely agree, and I think you're exactly right. Um, I think the last thing we'll really look at on Dr. Spanier's survey, again, these slides will be available for the audience if you'd like to dig in a little bit. It's a nice little format if you'd ever want to use it. Those of you in the audience, as a questionnaire for your medical staff members to start to get a feel for how they're learning about these things and where you've got an opportunity to be a partner, you're welcome to do that. But when we ask at number 10, any new procedural techniques or products coming out soon that you're aware of, we always like to ask that. Custom total joints, I'm assuming he's talking about the 3D printed components or the custom printed components. Robotic total joint replacement, the Makos, obviously, custom cutting guides, and then medial pivot knees are of interest. So as you're sourcing and contracting in this category, just here's one data point for you, some of the practice patterns and techniques that are on the radar of an up-and-coming surgeon. So you may just want to have those in your hip pocket. At this time, I'm happy to shift the floor more primarily over to Bruce because I'm excited to have the audience hear some of the work that he's done, the strategy that he's taken in his most recent total joint RFP process, and just get to give a download to us of all of this rich knowledge he's developed over a great career in healthcare. So Bruce, again, thank you.
Wow.
Bruce is a longtime industry leader and executive. He's with New Hanover Regional Medical Center right now and has been for the last 11 or 12 years. A strong orthopedic service line there at New Hanover. Great model, great performance in the marketplace, and continues to find new pockets of savings. So Bruce, I'm going to turn this over to you to tell the audience a little bit about your most recent total joint project, to also paint the picture of the backdrop on things that still need fleshing out around your medical staff alignment and some of the work you've done with service line teams, and just look forward to the audience getting to hear your story.
Okay, well, thank you. And you know, as I give you as much as I can here in the time that we have, and if I begin going astray, please don't hesitate to cut me off here.
No.
So yes, very quickly, I've been here as we've mentioned 11, 12 years, and we just concluded it's either the 5th or 6th RFP in my tenure here. When we first started the process many years ago, we were, at least at that time and maybe today still, the typical approach to a orthopedic joint RFP. We used the construct approach where, we would say, okay, here's a low demand hip and we'll pay X for that. Here's a medium and we'll pay Y, and here's a high demand is Z. And basically we, maybe you had, I don't know, 8, 9, a dozen different constructs. You set a price and vendor agreed to it or maybe didn't agree to it. But we did that for the first few iterations I was here, fairly successfully. We did well at it. But then we made the determination for a couple of reasons that we needed to get away from the construct approach to our RFP strategy. The minor reason, if you will, was we felt we had to change our strategy. We used the same approach so many times, and we just felt we needed to do something to shake the vendor world up and to just throw a curve at them and something new. We didn't want to be predictable, if you will. But the major approach, quite frankly, was we had to get to essentially line item pricing because of our ERP, which for us is Lawson, because of the way we have our ERP integrated with the Epic Uptime module in our operating room. And for that to be the most efficient and to operate the best, it needs the line item detail, which for us in our design has to come from Lawson. So we said, you know what, with both of those things in the back of our mind, we're going to a line item approach with our RFP. Now we did that not this time, the time before. We refined it this time, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And we developed what we call a formulary, and basically it said, for example, that a metal head product item we're going to pay X for, a ceramic head we're going to pay Y for. So we got it down a little bit more finite than just saying high demand, low demand, and we kind of said we'll use that as our formulary, and this is the price that we will pay. And then we asked our vendor partners to say which of your catalog numbers belong in this area versus that area. And ultimately doing that, it then gets down to line item pricing that we needed for Epic. It was a task. If you are considering doing that, or if you're like us, partially forced into doing that, the first time you do it, it's a bear. We increased our ERP item file by almost 35,000 items the first time that we did it. But it worked. It was a lot of hard work, but it worked. The key to it, and this we refined this time around, the key to it is we were very clear to our potential business partners that if there's any controversy about whether your item, your product belongs in this category versus that category, and you want it in the higher price category, at the end of the day, our surgeons will decide which category it goes into. And it's worked well. The surgeons do get actively involved in the clinical aspect of our RFP process. I believe we, and again, the we is myself and my service line administrator, I think before we released the RFP this past time, which is approximately 3 months ago now, 4 months ago, we took each of the categories from the previous time and we sat down with the surgeons, and to the point from the doctor's slide about new technology, we sat down with them and we said, okay, last time we only had a single patella. Do we need 2 patellas this time? The last time, this is a bad example because we had it both times, but for example, last time we didn't have oxinium. Do we need oxinium this time? What are the technologies, and do we need a new category for that technology? And that's how we really engage and get our guys into this. Mm-hmm. They help us with those categories. Mm-hmm. What we did next is we went out and we used Curvo, and I feel very good about the product and what they did for us. And I'm guessing you're on the call because you also use Curvo. We used Curvo then to look at these categories and say, okay, this is what we were paying for that category. What should we now be paying for that category? Or if it's a category we didn't have last time, Curvo did a good job of kind of categorizing our spend. And we said, okay, this is what we need to ask for in that category this coming RFP. We then sat down again with our surgeons one last time and said, here's the categories you told us, here's the clinical categories that you told us need to be part of our RFP. Here's the price we paid last time. Here's the price that seems to be available in the market. Here's the price that we're going to ask for. Can you support that? And they all did. We have 6 of surgeons that probably do about 85% of our joints. So those are the 6 that we focused on. Mm-hmm. And when they came to agreement and said, yes, that's what we can support, that's the RFP that went out. Because one of the things about our RFP process is you've got, if you don't meet the cap, then you don't get to play. Now we'll make an award maybe in the knee category, but not in the hip category if you don't meet the hip caps, or vice versa. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, it's our surgeons that have to support that price point and be willing to go to bat with us when we do get pushback from the vendor. Mm-hmm. So any comments, Andy, you want me to keep going, or any question you want?
I think a good way to sum it up, first of all, I think you had a nice example of the surgeons backing you up on one of those particular discussions.
Certainly.
Yeah.
I'll be happy to share that. Yeah.
Yeah. Please.
So again, this I think demonstrates that how engaged our surgeons are, and I hope some of you could experience the same engagement, or you will experience the same engagement, because that's only going to increase your opportunity for success. So this happened. I actually, again, not this time, previous time, but and it happened to be one of the probably mid-market share manufacturers that we deal with, and one of our not highest volume surgeons, but a good volume surgeon, who actually got on the phone with me with his business partner, who met most of the caps except one. And he got on the phone with me and told his business partner that not only am I not going to be allowed to use this because you didn't meet the cap, but if that continues to happen, I won't use any of your products. And the next day, guess what happened? We had the price we needed, and they have a full position on the. Again, this happened previous time. They had got a full position on the RFP. But that's how engaged our surgeons are. And at the end of the day, I think myself and our service line administrator, we do a pretty good job. We put a pretty good RFP together. But that's the way you can drive some of the success that we've had. The surgeons carry the clout. We don't.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the ultimate fruit of the foundations that you've laid, frankly, that, and I think with this latest iteration, on a category that was already well run, not as if the things had gone amok in total joints. I think you've come out of it with another $750,000 in annual savings. Is that accurate? That's the number. I told my boss 650 just so I kind of look even better. That's a little there.
But yeah, it's going to be. We project it's going to be close to $750,000.
Right, and then I think one of the other outcomes was that you ended up having a vendor that you kind of had to let walk. Is that right?
That is also true. We had one vendor who previous time lost a position on hips, kept the position on knees because they did meet the pricing.
Mm-hmm.
This time they weren't close on knees, and our surgeons said, it is what it is, and they can't play. They're off the island.
Yeah. Oh, that's just excellent. And let me see if I can sum up maybe the keys to success here. And Bruce, you can tell me if I'm doing a good job of this or not. But it sounds like the alignment of the medical staff began with really good, transparent data about device cost, procedure profitability, and reimbursement. Just full transparency with good, clean data. One of the key tenets and foundations to success here. Is that accurate?
Yeah, 100% accurate. And just one little added comment to that. I mentioned this peri-op committee where final product decision is made.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we present, not just on total joints, we could be talking about a specialized suture. We could be talking about a drape. Drape's a bad example, but not only do we show them what the current cost of the product is, what the recommended cost of the product the cost of the products being recommended, if it is a significant cost product that may either contribute or detract from our margin, we show that to them too. And that happens every month at the meeting I mentioned.
Yeah. So great lead into the next key or tenet, I'd say, is that you've got the venue through the service line committee meetings, the orthopedic peri-op committee meetings, as well as a strong sidekick in the service line with your administrator to be that vehicle and that channel for sharing the good data as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's particularly critical here for me to have that administrator role because, again, very quickly here at New Hanover, I work at our main campus here in Wilmington, which is the flagship hospital, if you will, because we do all of our orthopedic work across town, roughly about 5 miles away, in a much smaller hospital because it's devoted only to orthopedic inpatient, outpatient surgery. He's located at that campus, so he's got quicker access. He's got almost hourly access into the surgeons. So again, it's key to have it for me in this particular situation. It's key to have that relationship because again, he can get to him before the sales rep does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that access is huge, and having that team member in your corner. And then one of the final tenets, I think you're too modest to say this, but I'm going to say it, is subject matter expertise. Is that the team members doing the sourcing and contracting need to know their stuff on this category. You need to understand how the parts go together. You need to understand some of the differences in technology and the aims and the constructs, and you need to be conversant in that to be credible with your surgeons. And you have established that subject matter knowledge. You've built it over these years, and you're using resources in the marketplace to help continually augment and inform that. But that transparency of data, the venue and the team aspect, to have a mechanism for engaging the surgeons and sharing that data and communicating with them. And then that subject matter expertise. Whenever I hear you talk, those to me seem like the 3 tenets that are actionable, that our audience could go out and begin to start laying the foundation for in their own organizations. Any other keys to success you'd add to that or tweak from my synopsis there?
I think you've hit the key points. I would just say, you can see from my picture, most of my hair is gray. I've been doing this a lot of years. It doesn't come overnight. It takes, I don't know if tenacity, persistence maybe not tenacity, maybe persistence is a better word. It takes persistence and just the other things I don't think I said specifically, but, obviously you got to have good data and present it in such a way that you're not wasting the surgeon's time. Mm-hmm. I mean, boy, I'll tell you, that'll get you off on the wrong foot right away because for those guys, time's money. So concise data, accurate data, and you're probably going to get told no the first time. I did, maybe even the second time, but don't give up, because I think that persistence also resonates. Right. Maybe not with every surgeon, because some of them are going to think you're a pest, but that some days that's what we're here for. So that's just kind of just maybe a little more background to what you said.
No, that's great. The idea of persistence and keep trying. I think there's a ton of merit to that you're going against the grain, especially in an organization where those roots and those seeds aren't there. And it does take a little bit of stick-to-itiveness to begin to build those bridges. I think that's an excellent point. This has been so great, Bruce, and we've got some audience questions. I'd like to turn back over to Steve to field those. If I don't get another chance on the call, I do want to thank you again so much for sharing these stories. I know that the audience has plenty to ask, so I want to get to those as well.
Okay, well, thank you. I enjoyed doing it. It was fun.
Good.
Great.
Thanks, Steve.
Well, thanks, Bruce and Andy. Thanks so much. I think we could probably talk all afternoon about this, but let's go ahead and go to the questions. A couple questions here are really about your surgeons. So the first one comes from Todd, and it says he'd like some definition on what you mean by physician support. And to clarify that, he says, does that mean they will switch vendors?
Does that mean they'll switch vendors? Wow. We've only had that happen. Let me think when I say that. No, twice. In my time here, we've only had that happen twice with our major joint surgeons, the ones I mentioned earlier. And they quite frankly, and being transparent, they did that some on their own volition. I do think in one case, the particular surgeon, who was probably our highest volume surgeon, did make a switch from one manufacturer to another manufacturer. And I think some of that was because of some of the financial games they were playing. But I think he came to that decision on his own. I don't want to sit here and tell you he did it for me. That would be misleading. But I think he did it because of our education of him and some of the financial aspects of what was going on, and we did that through the data. So they did one, but fortunately, as my other example with the story about the surgeon on the phone, more times than not, when they've been called into it and made the ask usually produces what we were looking for, and I haven't had to ask them to switch. But remember what we just said, they also just dropped the vendor entirely because they didn't meet our pricing.
Yeah, no,
that's great.
Great answer. So just kind of to codify that, for most of the 5-6 contracting cycles that you've done there at New Hanover, doctors haven't had to switch, and administration and supply chain has gotten the competitive pricing that you've been looking for, right?
Correct.
Yeah, it's great.
Thanks, Bruce. Another question comes from Jay and wanted to know if your surgeons are employed at the hospital.
No, they are not. Now we do have what we call, well, it's basically a gain sharing agreement with our orthopedic surgeons. So yes, they do benefit from savings, but before they can benefit from savings, they have to meet some quality metrics and some efficiency metrics. For example, on quality, it could be readmission or infection rate. Efficiency could be first case on time start percentage. So they've got to meet those before they can even share in any savings. And then they have to hit a specific target in savings. So yes, there's some financial incentive to do so, but it's wrapped again into an overall program. It's not just money savings on products.
Gotcha. No, that's good. How long has that gain share been in place, Bruce?
This August, we'll be starting our 3rd year.
Okay, great.
So this was actually, this recent RFP was the first time the gain sharing was in place when we did our RFP.
Good to know.
That's great, Bruce. I'm sure a lot of people out there are thinking about other ways to align with their surgeons financially like that. Another question for you, and let me just tell the audience, if you've got a question, just the Q&A at the bottom there or the comments. This is the last one that I think, but unless someone has another one, feel free to ask more questions. But this one is about your relationship with the service line. And really the question is, what advice would you give to someone who currently does not have that strong relationship with the service line leadership? How can they develop that?
So again, I got to think back to when I first got here, because I've just been fortunate now. I think I shared this with the Curvo team when we were talking about this. Again, I've been here almost 12 years and I'm on my 4th service line administrator. So I think the last couple, the shoe was on their foot to develop it with me. But when I first got here, I think I made the overture. I went out to it was another guy who coincidentally was an RN, but was in this administrative role. And I reached out to him. I was coming from a location that actually even did more joints than we do here. And so I had a little bit of experience, and I went to him and said, hey, look, I think I have some experience that I can help you. And I then made sure that in the first go round, I gave him all the credit. I made sure that he understood I was there to help him. And it didn't take long for him to see that. And he and I did the first 2 together. He got promoted, by the way. He's the administrator of our orthopedic hospital now. I don't know if I had something to do with that or not, but I think it was just making the overture to him and showing him, look, I'm here to help you. And we clicked, it worked.
Well, that's great, Bruce. It sounds like you took the first step there. And so a lot of people on the call, if you're having any trouble with that alignment, sounds like a good lesson learned there is take the first step, kind of open hands, and see how you can help that individual. Okay, so it looks like that's the end of the questions. I'm sure if anybody else has other ones, feel free to write us. We will wrap up the webcast now. Some final things, though, we'll be doing future webcasts, and we have a lot of different categories to cover. If you have any experience directly like Bruce has had with a sourcing project recently and wanted to share, we'd love to interview and have a conversation about that. We're going to have a part 2 to this one with Dr. Spanyer later in the summer. So you'll get an invitation to that too, get to hear the doctor's perspective. Now it's a different hospital, but should be good. And then I just want to thank you, Bruce, again. Really appreciate your time here. This is a great conversation. We had a lot of people who have been on this webinar. And Andy, thank you for leading the conversation. Bruce, we'll talk to you again soon, I'm sure. Everybody on the call, have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it.
Bruce. Thanks, everyone.